Now, in response to my review of the Brave browser the other day, Big Len here had a very good comment with some concerns that he sees with it. The first, of course, is that they're relying upon a cryptocurrency for all the transactions that they'll be doing for their monetization system. I'll get into that in a little bit later on in the discussion here. But he's also concerned, though, about how people could afford to use the internet if they had to pay for everything that they do online. He understands that it takes money to live, but our world simply cannot afford premium everything. And I think that's kind of the problem we're in right now, is that things are either free or they require some huge subscription. And what I liked about the Brave model is that it's looking at something in between, where you are dedicating an amount of money that you would maybe normally pay for a subscription somewhere, and then directing those funds out based on the attention that you're giving to a specific site. That's actually exactly how YouTube Premium works. I am paid for every minute of your attention based on the subscription dollars that you're putting in every month. And this is similar to what Brave is doing. They're going to put an ad in front of you. They will pay you a little bit of money to look at that ad. You can choose to pocket those dollars or distribute those dollars out to the things that you've been looking at based on the amount of attention that you've applied to their sites. That's the model, and it's very different than the model we have now, where everything is free but has ads attached to it. And what began as something that was very simple, which was you go on a website and you see an ad, has turned into something much more complex because advertisers want to target audience versus publications. And when they want to target audience, that means you have to give up some of your personal privacy to get that stuff for free so that the ad can be targeted to you specifically. And this is what it looks like now in 2019 after all of these systems have had essentially 20 years to develop. So while you're sitting at your computer and browsing a website that has ads on it, what's happening is that your web browser is sending out a lot of information to a supply-side platform to determine exactly who you are and what the value of your attention might be. Some of the things that are being transmitted include your location. In some cases, it'll be your GPS location from your phone. All those free apps that you downloaded, well, guess what? When you agreed to share your location with the app, that began broadcasting your exact precise location that advertisers are using for very finely targeted advertising. It's also doing some stuff based on your IP or your MAC address. It's sending all that stuff up to the mothership there for targeting. There's also first-party cookies, like an abandoned shopping cart. Let's say you were over at Amazon, you put some ramen noodles or something in your cart, and you didn't buy them. Well, there's a cookie generated that will keep putting those ramen noodles in front of you until you go back to Amazon and finally complete the transaction. That is a very common thing to do with first-party cookies. But you can also have a first-party cookie for sites that you visited and a whole bunch of other things to make you try to come back again. On mobile, you can target by device ID. So even though they don't know your name, they might know the ID of your phone based on an app, again, that you installed at some point. And perhaps that app developer is making money with that free app by selling device IDs to advertisers. That is another way that they can find ways to target you. And then, of course, there are the third-party cookies, which are consumer profiles based on browsing history. And they develop these in a whole bunch of different ways, but basically you can rest assured that if you've ever made a purchase in your life, it is likely tied to an online profile that your browser is giving up every time you go somewhere. And that is why the ads that you see are often very well tailored to you, and why your spouse or your best friend or your kids will see something totally different than you do, because even though they don't know your exact identity, they know everything else about you. And this whole thing happens pretty much in real time. Here's an example of something you can buy from one of these advertising platforms. They have even down to the model number of an Acura, how many active users are out there. And if I am trying to sell you a new Acura or maybe a competing car, and I know I've got a car that lines up well with the Acura MDX, I can, with a good degree of confidence, know that I can reach about 1.1 million owners of that car to try to convince them to buy mine or maybe upgrade the car that they're in or whatever. And this is just one model of one automobile. And you can imagine just about everything else out there is also cataloged in this way. Your political leanings, the things that you support, your orientation, for example, you name it, it's in these systems and can be directly targeted just based on what your browser gives up every time it goes to one of these sites. Now, this is where the crazier thing starts. Now, remember, just a second ago, we transmitted all of our personal information via cookies from our web browser to a supply-side platform that is now feeding its data into an ad exchange. And they're saying to the ad exchange, hey, Lon is on a website right now. He's about to see an ad. He's got an Acura MDX. He is maybe 3 years into his ownership there. He's 42 years old. He's got 3 kids, and he's living in this New England state here. What do you got for me? So the what do you got for me comes from the demand side platforms. Now, if I am the car dealership or the brand and my agency wants to find potential customers, they are going out to these demand side platforms and saying, hey, we're looking to put our ad on any Acura MDX owner who's aged 30 to 45 and has 2 or 3 kids. So that meets my profile. So the ad exchange says, yep, we got those folks. How much do you want to pay for those people to see your ad? So maybe the folks on this DSP are going to bid $5 per 1,000. They call this a CPM. You pay for every 1,000 impressions, and typically it's like $5 or $6 per 1,000 if you're just out in the general commodities market, but it can go up from there, especially when you're dealing with video, like on YouTube, for example. Those cost a lot more. But for the sake of our argument here, we're going to say that this car dealership is going to pay $5 per 1,000 impressions. So they send that into the ad exchange. It's sitting in there waiting for these viewers of Acura MDX owners to appear on websites that are displaying ads from this exchange. But my competitor says, hey, we'll pay you $6 per 1,000 impressions for Lon's attention. And guess what? That $6 bid will win out. And this is all happening in real time. When you see one of those ads appear, this whole transaction occurs almost instantaneously, trillions of times a day. And it's a decentralized network. There's ad exchanges that kind of act as the hubs of this, but there are exchanges within exchanges. All this stuff is happening all while you're browsing the web, so you don't have to pay for anything. But the value of your attention increases with the amount of personal information that your browser is giving off. If you were just some random dude from New York City, that is not as valuable as the 42-year-old who's got 3 kids and an Acura MDX that he's 3 years into his lease on. That is much more valuable to advertisers, and there's a real profit motive to look at this. And of course, because we are dealing with an economy that is focused on audience targeting, the more efficient you can get with that targeting, the more valuable it's going to be. I'd much rather pay $20 to reach a small number of people that I know meets my criteria versus something much broader like I would get with a TV ad buy, for example. This is why advertisers love this stuff, and it's developed because nobody wants to pay for anything. So we just prefer just to have all this stuff happen in the background. We agree to some privacy policy that we never look at when we sign up with these sites, and here you go. This is what you end up with. Now, at the end of the chain here, the publisher does get a cut of this, but every step along the way here has money extracted, and the big money is in the services that match up my profile to other consumer data. In many cases, like when you buy that Acura MDX list, for example, you're adding maybe $2 or $3 per 1,000 impressions to the cost of your ad buy, and those dollars go straight to the company that is maintaining that database. Likewise, the ad exchange takes money out, the DSP takes money out, your agency, of course, is taking money out. And basically, at the end of the day, by my experience, I'm seeing about 83 cents as a publisher of a small website based on someone paying maybe $5 or $6 or more to advertise on my site. So the publishers are losing here to a large degree, but there's so much volume of traffic that they end up making enough to make these sites work. And the more traffic you have, the more money you're going to make. But along the way here, these people are making a lot more. And this is the ad industry. This is how it works. This is how I essentially earn my living on YouTube, because most of the revenue I get from YouTube comes from this targeted type of advertising where YouTube videos are being put in front of you based on specific profiles that advertisers are requesting. So I am benefiting from it personally. I know about all of this because I do some of this ad buying for some consulting clients as well. And this is the reality of the web that we're in today. Now, I like the fact that there are people looking at different ways to do things. And I think that is something that needs to happen because Facebook and Google now know a lot about us. In fact, they know more about us than all of those data matching services do. In the case of Google, they know what I'm thinking. They know what I'm searching for. In the case of Facebook, they know what my interests are because they know what I'm clicking on and what I'm spending more time looking at. And when they go to advertisers to sell something, they have a very large degree of confidence that the targeting that they are offering is going to be very accurate. And in my experience, especially on Facebook, it is very, very accurate. And it's pretty scary sometimes how accurate it is based on what they're able to discern from your activity. There's also some other things out there you might want to read, like this story in the Wall Street Journal. This was an editorial. Google actually knows what you've purchased on Amazon because they parse the emails coming back from Amazon when you get a receipt, and a number of other online retailers as well. You can actually pull up that information and look at it. That was a result, I believe, of the GDPR legislation that requires these companies to show you what they have on you. And that was really an eye-opener to a lot of folks because this, again, is information from your personal email that is being used to build out your advertising profile. Likewise, the credit card companies are not innocent here either. MasterCard and American Express have been selling advertisers your information for a very long time. In fact, I would say it predates even the internet. So what they're doing is they're taking consumer data based on your purchases on those credit cards. They're selling that data to these data aggregators who then profit from it by offering those profiles to these ad exchanges. This is big money, folks, and everyone who interacts with you in any which way possible is extracting that information and selling it, and it's buried somewhere in a privacy policy. And this 21st century focus on privacy has begun to expose practices from the 20th century that have kind of continued into this internet era. I got the College Board logo up here because I took one of their tests when I was in high school. They managed the PSAT, the SAT, and a number of other entrance exams, essentially, that American high school students take when they're applying to college. And they took my personal information and sold it to I don't know how many different colleges and related businesses, because within a month of taking that test, my phone is ringing off the hook with recruiters. I was getting military recruiters calling me, college recruiters calling me. I was getting tons and tons of promotional flyers from different colleges in the mail. It was nuts. In fact, there were some that kept mailing me right through my college years, hoping that I might transfer to their school. And it all began when I took that test. I was not getting any of that stuff before. After the test, the floodgates opened. And this was all pre-consumer internet. So you can imagine that this data is likely getting sold now into these ad exchanges as well, because those advertisers, those recruiters, want to find those kids, and they're going to be going to digital platforms to do it. They do have a line in their privacy policy about the student search service, but you have to go through the trouble of calling them or writing them to get yourself out of it, and they promote this as a very good thing for colleges to use to reach students that are applying. And of course, they're making money off of this. And that has been going on for decades. Magazine subscriptions, those have been sold out to consumer data lists in the past as well. So all this stuff has been happening before, but now we're in this era of hyper-efficient targeting and hyper-efficient computers that can piece a lot of data together very quickly. And it's possible to take portions of data from all these different lists and begin developing some very finely tuned profiles of individuals and their consumer behaviors, and again, the way they may even think and interact with others. And that is where I think a lot of this stuff is getting scary. Now, Apple is becoming more and more outspoken on this. Now, it should be noted that Apple did try to launch their own ad network a while back to target iPhone users in free apps. They dropped that about 5 or 6 years ago, but it was something they were attempting to do. Now they're looking at it from a different perspective to say that we're the privacy company, and they can do that because they charge more for their products. They actually build in profit margin into the hardware as opposed to selling the hardware at a slimmer margin in the hopes that they'll make it back on advertising and other means of reaching consumers through directly targeted means. But this is the direction that Apple is taking. They want to put more on the device and less in the data center. And I think as devices get more powerful, I think we might begin seeing maybe a compromise where you will be able to have the phone kind of monitor what you are doing, but not releasing that data out and waiting to see what comes to it from exchanges looking to reach particular customers. And that might give you more control as to what data goes out, what information you want to keep in. And what I'm seeing with Apple in particular, with their Siri system, is that it is able now to look in my calendar and see that I have a meeting coming up. And from that calendar entry, it can then go and check the traffic. But all along the way, nothing is happening in a data center. The phone is doing all of it locally. And as phones get more powerful, I think we might start seeing more and more of this get offloaded to the local device and give the user the option to share certain bits of information or not, yet still gain some of the convenience that we're having from all of this AI working on our behalf. Now, Apple gets criticized because Siri is not as advanced as the Google Assistant, for example, but the Google Assistant lives in a data center where it has all of this personal information on you and is able to, of course, process that and do some pretty amazing things with it. But it is becoming very concerning to know that so much of our private lives are sitting in these data centers and potentially accessible to the government and perhaps hackers as well if they're able to get into it. So that brings us back to the Brave browser and their basic attention token that will be the currency of this advertising model that they are building. And essentially what's going to happen here is that the browser is going to have some information collected about you, but it's not sending that data out to anyone. What's going to happen instead is that a catalog of potential ads will be pushed out to the browser, and the browser locally will determine what ads get matched up to you. Now, I think this is going to be difficult to implement at scale, especially if all of these ads, millions of them, are getting sent down to devices. I'm sure they're going to come up with some way to make that process a little bit more efficient. But what's happening here is that rather than your browser telling the world everything that you're doing, it tells the world nothing and says, hey, send me whatever ads you have, and I'll find the one that's most appropriate for the viewer that's on my current device. It will then, I guess, send back some data to say that the ad was viewed, but Brave will not be getting any information about the person viewing it, and it's relying on the browser internally to be able to make that determination. So it's going to work very similar, actually, to how the exchange system works now, but the difference is that your browser isn't going to be telling the world about you. It's going to keep what it knows and then look at what the world has for it. And I think that's a really intriguing way to look at this advertising and privacy problem, because we do need ads to keep the web going, and we have to find a way to protect user privacy at the same time. Will Brave dominate this market? Probably not, but I can see this idea pushing the incumbent advertising industry into a more acceptable means of targeting for consumers. And this could very well be a model that will be replicated across the industry as more and more consumers opt out of being tracked online.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters, the Four Guys with Quarters podcast, Tom Albrecht, Brian Parker, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV